Hey, good day, everyone. My name is Nancy Anderson, and I am an attorney with the Alabama Disabilities Advocacy Program, or ADAP, ADAP for short. There are a lot of unknowns about how this school year is going to play out, and it seems like things are changing every day. Parents are being bombarded with new options, new learning platforms, new policies, and even new fears. What I'm going to do in this presentation is focus on those things that we know for sure. My goal is to focus on fundamentals, basic special education legal principles, what you need to know and think about to effectively advocate for your child in yet another year that is going to be impacted by the coronavirus. If you remember nothing else from today's presentation, please remember how to get up with us. ADAP provides free legal services to protect the civil rights of persons with disabilities, including students receiving services through an IEP or a 504 plan. And while I'm going to be covering, like I said, fundamental special education rules, you might have specific questions about how the rules apply to your child. Or you might have questions about advocacy steps you should take. Or you might be in a dispute with your child's school. Please feel free to call us and set up a telephone intake appointment with our intake specialist. Or you can get the process started by using our online intake form. It's on the front page of our website, which is there on the screen in front of you. Okay, so let's get going on some of the fundamentals I've been talking about. First, pandemic or not, the IDEA is still in full effect. It hasn't been placed on hold because of the virus. It hasn't been waived. It hasn't taken a hiatus. Your child is still entitled under the IDEA, or Section 504 for that matter, to what is called a free appropriate public education, or FAPE for short. Among other things, that means that your child is entitled to education and support services to ensure that all her learning needs are met. And remember, we're not talking just about the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. We're talking about all of your child's needs. Academic needs, yes, certainly, but also any functional, behavioral, and transitional needs that your child has. None of those needs go away because of the pandemic, just like the IDEA didn't go away because of the pandemic. And part of providing a free, appropriate public education to your child is giving her the regular education, special education, and related services that she needs to move through the state content standards for the grade that she is in and to meet identified IEP goals. And those needs have to be met regardless of where or how your child is attending school this year. Your child's right to FAPE follows him no matter where he is being educated, whether he's in school, going virtually on some sort of learning platform, or there's some sort of hybrid plan. He is entitled to a free, appropriate public education. Now, certainly, implementing services and supports to meet your child's needs appropriately is going to be really tough this year, especially if your child is going to be learning remotely. Last spring, we know a lot of things fell through the cracks. So when you and the rest of your child's team sit down in a planning meeting, the very best is going to have to come out of everyone at the table. Everyone is going to have to show a lot of creativity and collaboration and communication. But just remember that no matter what is being suggested, all the services provided to your child have to be individualized to his needs. Individualized planning is one of the fundamentals of the IDEA. So let's take an example. Let's say your child's IEP team says to you, well, we're going to be able to provide speech services to your son in this particular way, whatever way it is. Well, will the school's suggested method, in fact, meet your child's needs? It may or may not. You should be asking questions about the school's plans. Why do they think their plan will work? How are they going to track your child's progress to see if it works? That sort of thing. Here's another example. Based on your experiences from last spring, a pre-recorded math lesson might not cut it for your child. She might need one-on-one time built into her schedule with either a teacher or an aide. And maybe that one-on-one time really needs to be in person with all the required safety considerations, taken into account. Planning this year is going to be really difficult, but IEPs are not a one-size-fits-all plan, and you should not give up on that individualization. Now, as I said earlier last spring, a lot of things fell through the cracks. There were some school districts and teachers that did things really well and some that didn't. Some families and kids that were able to do remote learning, and for others, well, for many others, it was really kind of a disaster. There are a lot of scary things about this pandemic, and one of them is that the normal climb, the normal growth your child should have been doing was very likely disrupted because of the pandemic. It's possible that your child's upward learning progress stopped or faltered, or even that your child regressed, that she went backwards, losing skills she had already learned. Somehow or another, and hopefully sooner rather than later, that learning loss, some people refer to it as a learning slide or even the COVID slide. Whatever term you use, that learning loss has to be made up. Your child has to be put back to where he would have been had this pandemic not occurred. Lots of children experience this kind of learning loss or regression, both children with and without disabilities. Your child, when she left school last spring, is likely a very different child than the one who's going to show up for school this fall because of that learning loss. So a key issue for schools is figuring out where everyone is skill-wise so they know how to get them started. Your school should have plans to assess for learning loss and provide support to students so that that learning loss can be remedied. You should find out how your school plans to assess all students, but don't end it there. For your child with disabilities who's receiving special ed services, for your child, it might be necessary to do more specialized kinds of assessments. Again, across all areas, academics, behavior, functional, transitional areas, to figure out where he is and what kind of supports he needs. And the decisions about what assessments need to be done for your child should be part of an IEP meeting. Now, you might hear your school talking about using MTSS. That stands for Multi-Tiered System of Supports to address learning loss. So what is MTSS? It's basically a structure by which schools provide targeted support to struggling students. It's a tiered framework where the level of support increases in intensity from one level to the next. So for example, some kids might be put in small groups to get targeted reading interventions. Other kids might need to move up from that small group setting to more one-on-one help. MTSS is not just for kids with disabilities. It's as applicable to kids without disabilities, and it's about addressing needs in all areas: academic, behavior, functional. But regardless of how your school does it, getting kids back to where they would have been had this pandemic not occurred is really vital. It might not be possible to do catch up all in one semester, or next semester, or even by next summer, but at some point, kids have to be put back to where they would have been had this pandemic not occurred. Now, part of putting a student with disabilities back on track might include providing him with what are called in the special education world compensatory services. The United States Department of Education issued guidance earlier this spring that spoke directly to the fact that many children with disabilities might need compensatory education services. So here's the gist of what compensatory education services are. When your child's special education and related services weren't provided, as laid out in the IEP, regardless of the reason why, it may result in your child being denied the free appropriate public education to which he's entitled. The remedy for failing to provide FAPE can be compensatory education services. Now, I'll be frank, the term comp ed freaks some school districts out because it makes it sound as if they did something wrong and they don't want to get blamed for the chaos that was brought about in the spring because of the pandemic. Some districts don't want to use the term comp ed and are using terms like make-up learning or catch-up learning or unfinished learning. I heard someone kind of jokingly say that these services should be called COVID catch-up, which has a nice ring to it, if nothing else. The Texas Department of Education is pretty bold about acknowledging the concept of comp ed and embracing the term. What you see on the screen in front of you is a snip of a handout that it has put out about comp ed. Now, deciding whether a child needs comp ed or compensatory education is pretty fact specific, and by and large, the question turns on how your child was harmed educationally because the IEP services weren't provided to him. And it's a team decision. So basically, if you're at an IEP meeting talking about comp ed, you need to be thinking about what happened with your child's services last spring and the impact on your child. We have on our website a checklist that'll walk you through a series of questions to help you prepare to talk about those things. And that same checklist will also help you identify what worked and what didn't work last year with remote learning, so that hopefully you can avoid the same mistakes this year and also build on, frankly, the good things that did happen. What did work for your child? So far, we've talked a lot about the rights of students who are already eligible, but the fact that the IDEA and Section 504 are still going strong means that schools have to be doing what are called child find activities. They have to identify kids who are suspected of having a disability, evaluate them, and determine whether they are eligible. When schools were closed in the spring, a lot of kids got stuck. Referrals weren't accepted, evaluations weren't begun, or they weren't finished. Hopefully, by now your school has figured out a way to keep this process moving forward. But if your child is stuck, or if you work with a stuck child, contact your school and ask for how it's going to do its child find activities, its legally required child find activities. Hopefully it has a plan like that. And, if that doesn't work, just call us. . You are, as always, an essential member of your child's IEP team. And hopefully this presentation has refreshed your memory about special education basics, special education principles that are still in effect, pandemic or not. To bone up even more, we suggest that you take a look at ADAP's Special Education Parent Manual, which is on our website. And then, as I said earlier, we have that learning checklist, as well as some other COVID-specific special education resources on our website. So let's just quickly review the different foundational principles that I've talked about today. First, the IDEA in Section 504 are still in effect. They haven't been put on hiatus. They're going strong. Your child is entitled to FAPE, a free appropriate public education, with all that that entails, including meeting all of your child's disability-related learning needs. Your child's right to FAPE follows your child no matter where he is learning, remotely, in school, some sort of hybrid plan. The school doesn't get a pass on providing FAPE to your child because he's learning remotely or only going to school, let's say, 2 days a week in person. Services, of course, have to be individualized. They have to be wrapped around the unique needs of your child. Your child may need makeup learning services to get him back to where he was had the pandemic not occurred. And he may be entitled to compensatory educational services. And then finally, you are a key member of your child's team, and we want to help you become an even stronger advocate in those team meetings. So I'm going to finish where I started, which is, again, this is the contact information for how to get up with us. You can email us, you can call us to set up a telephone intake appointment, you can use our online intake form that is on our website. There's one other final thought that I want to share with you, and it is the one that is the backbone for everything that we've talked about today and for all of our advocacy. And that is, remember, special education is a right. It isn't a favor. Thank you all for listening today. We appreciate your time.